prioritize issues, how to formulate a problem, and look for its causes and solutions. I will also give you strategies and tools to approach problem solving calmly. Nowadays, problem solving is an essential know-how. It is a key skill for success. We hire fewer and fewer people to work in factories or to press buttons. Now there are computers and machines for that. We hire people for their ability to analyze, to reflect, evaluate options, make decisions, and implement them. Also, at a time when technology is progressing exponentially, it is important to constantly renew yourself, to improve your service or your product if you want to remain competitive, keep your leading position, or even better, gain market share. You must adopt the mindset of continuous improvement. Whether you offer a service, a product, or your skills, listening to your customers to understand the problems they encounter, knowing how to reformulate them and solving them is a key skill for success, whatever your field is. Everything is going faster and faster. Information is also disseminated very quickly. Nowadays, online, the slightest misstep is heavily penalized by negative comments. You should know that in general, people are much more likely to complain and write negative comments when something does not please them than to express their satisfaction. It's sad, but it's the reality. It is therefore necessary to know how to react correctly when faced with a problem, a degradation of your service, or a crisis situation. You must learn to act quickly and effectively while remaining calm to implement corrective actions. You will thus limit the impact on your customers, and you will also avoid bad publicity, bad comments which could be broadcast in the media and affect the image of your service or your product. Most people feel overwhelmed with stress when they face a problem. They feel paralyzed. They fail to structure their ideas. And there are reasons behind this phenomenon, and there are also techniques to overcome them. You can apply strategies that will allow you to approach problem solving with calm and serenity. At the end of this training, you will be able to clearly identify a problem and its causes, look for solutions, and evaluate them to make a decision. I don't just talk about theory in this training. I promised you a practical training that goes straight to the point. This is why I keep this introduction as short as possible. I just would like to point out that this training is in the form of videos, and the different videos follow a very specific order, so I recommend that you follow them in order. And if you want to benefit as much possible from the information of this training, I strongly recommend that you do the various exercises, because you can know all the techniques. If you do not apply them, you cannot get the results you want. Knowing is not enough. You have to apply. And I'm here to answer your questions if needed. Before moving on, I would like to briefly introduce you the content of the training to give you an overview of what you are going to learn. I will present the 4 major steps to master problem solving. Before starting to tackle the problem, it is necessary to adopt the right state of mind so that this task is as positive and productive as possible. We will see together how to change our perception of the problems. Then, it is important to understand the problem, to collect all the information allow you to describe the situation in order to be able to reformulate the problem. And this is called framing. Secondly, it is necessary to embark on an analysis phase to identify the causes of the problem. You will see that it is essential to do some investigative work to go back to the real source of the problem. You will learn tools like the 5 whys technique or the Ishikawa diagram, also called the fishbone. And once clear on the causes, you will discover methods to find solutions and how to mobilize your colleagues for productive collaborations and in a benevolent atmosphere. We will then discuss the 6 thinking hats method, and I will give you some tips for successful brainstorming. We will also see how to evaluate the solutions in order to make the best decision. And nothing changes without action. In this part, we will see how to implement the selected solution or solutions to solve the problem encountered and ensure follow-up by defining, measuring, and performance indicators. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. It may surprise you, but Fear is one of the main obstacles to solving problems. Most people spend more time wondering what will happen if they make a mistake, choose the wrong solution, or fail than they spend performing the actions necessary to find a solution to the problem. They are paralyzed by fear. The fear of the opinion of others, the fear of being seen as incompetent, the fear of suggesting a solution that will not be accepted. One of the most basic fears is the fear of being seen as incompetent if you don't solve the problem on your own. In the worst case, even we speak about the imposter syndrome. This corresponds to a form of unhealthy doubt which consists in doubting oneself and one's abilities. We tell ourselves that we are incapable. We think that we do not deserve our job. We think that sooner or later, the others will discover that we are not up to it. They will therefore discover that we are imposters. According to the Journal of Behavior Science, 70% of people worldwide suffer from imposter syndrome at some point of their life. 70% is huge. Fortunately, in this statistic, we are talking about a state that is not permanent. When I started my job, I was working as a functional analyst in a multinational, and one of the activities of my job was to deal with problems reported by customers on products. So I remember that at the beginning I was completely stressed as soon as I received a problem. It was very uncomfortable for me. If I received a critical and urgent incident, I was sure that I needed 2 coffees and something sweet to relieve the pressure. A pressure that I put on myself all alone. I absolutely wanted to solve the problems by myself because I was afraid of what others may think if I asked for help. I was afraid to ask questions or ask for help. I remember that sometimes I spent hours and hours researching on my own, reading documentation, doing tests, often without much success. Obviously, with hindsight, I know it was not the right approach. I was new. I did not know the products nor the history of the different incidents that were reported. So I searched with all the goodwill in the world, but I did not find the solution. And it was completely normal to ask questions and ask for help. Solving my first problems, my first incidents, would have been much faster and much more efficient if I had called on my colleagues to benefit from their experience, their knowledge, their methodologies from the start. Also, I realized that the simple fact of talking about the problem, of explaining it to another person, made its resolution easier. Discussion with other people allows you to share different opinions, different point of views, and help you solve the problems. In the end, it's like putting several brains to work to solve a problem. I like this quote from Les Brown who said, "Ask for help, not because you are weak, but because you want to remain strong." I tell you this story to show you that it happens to all of us to be afraid, and it is perfectly normal. We are all afraid. Now the question is, how to manage fear to prevent it from slowing us down and destabilizing us. The difference between successful people and others is their ability to act despite fear. These people know full well that the best way to overcome their fears is to face it. When you face your fears, they disappear or diminish in intensity. On the other hand, when you avoid what scares you, your fears only grow until they control all aspects of your life. And as your fear increases, your self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-respect decrease. I wanted to emphasize this point before moving on, because in the following videos, we will see that the way you define a problem plays a very important role in your perception of it and can help you overcome fear and act despite it. What is a problem? It is an interesting question. If we look at the dictionary definition, we found 2 approaches. In the general sense, we found that a problem is a difficulty that must be resolved to obtain a result. Unstable or dangerous situation requiring a decision. In this first definition, which we use most often, we find a vocabulary that accentuates fear, difficulty, unstable, danger. It is about something negative, something difficult to live with. It is therefore not surprising that we want to run away when we encounter a problem. We want to ignore it. Our brain is programmed like that. It is to protect us from danger by secreting adrenaline and making us flee. We feel destabilized because we give an emotional dimension to the problems. It's true. We talk about health problems, psychological problems, overweight problems, financial problems, and most of the time, the emotion associated with them are negative. Fear, sadness, anger, frustration. Now, if we look at the definition in the scientific sense, a problem is a question to be solved which is open to discussion. You see that this definition is much less emotionally charged. One technique to overcome the fear of problems is to opt for the definition in the scientific sense when approaching a problem. That way, you are hacking your brain. It no longer has any reason to scare you away, and you can tackle the problem, solving it in a more serene way. I therefore invite you to put yourself in the shoes of a scientist to change your perception. So instead of closing your eyes and ignoring the problems, you will make them visible. You will do everything to understand them and find solutions to overcome them. Or you can adopt the mindset of entrepreneurs who are constantly looking for problems to solve. For entrepreneurs, problems are synonymous with opportunities, because a problem can also be defined as the gap between a current situation and the desired situation. So we can then distinguish two types of problems: deviations and opportunities. The deviation, it is when the situation was better in the past and then it deteriorated. It is then necessary to solve the problem to return to the previous situation. In this case, to the question, has it ever worked? The answer is yes. So we will look for the cause of the problem in the events that took place in the past. We will wonder which parameter has been changed. In this situation, one is almost certain to be able to solve the problem one day. To take a concrete example, my internet connection was working well, then the internet speed started to degrade until it had no network at all. Has it worked before? Yes. What parameter has changed? The modem no longer works. It burned because of the storm. Solving the problem, changing the modem. The result is my internet connection is back and the performance is picking up. The second type of problem that can be encountered is called opportunity. This is an opportunity for improvement. It is when the situation has never been ideal and we identify an opportunity to obtain a more favorable situation. For example, I live in the countryside and the internet connection has been very slow and bad for a long time. Given my geographical location, the internet connection has never been better than what I'm currently experiencing. I reported this problem to my internet operator, and for them, the problem was an opportunity for improvement. By installing fiber, the optic fiber, so the performance of my internet connection has improved significantly, reaching a speed never reached before. Either way, remember that no situation is inherently good or bad. Everyone interprets a situation with their own filters, with their own assumptions, beliefs, past experiences. This is why, to a given situation or a given problem, several points of view correspond. A situation can be seen as favorable by one person and unfavorable by another. It all depends on their interpretation. It is up to you to view problems positively as opportunities that will lead to a better future situation. I insist on this point because your way of seeing the problems greatly influences your approach and also their resolution. To conclude this part on the definition of problems, I would like to return one last time to the importance of your attitude when you encounter a problem. The escalation of problems in companies is far too often a source of annoyance. There are those who ignore them until the situation is no longer sustainable. Those looking to get rid of it as quickly as possible, we all know the game of hot potato. Those who play ping pong and pass the ball to each other indefinitely. Those who implement a temporary solution and cross their fingers hoping things get better. But none of these solutions are sustainable in the long term, and the problems will reappear sooner or later. So it is better to tackle the problem as soon as it comes to us and discover its root cause. For this, I invite you to change your state of mind and to pay close attention to your language. What if with each new problem you stopped saying to yourself, "Oh no, another problem," and instead you said, "There you go, a new challenge, a new opportunity to improve." Don't you think that this will influence your results and how you approach the problem? Some would say that we play on words, and yet our language, our vocabulary largely determines our success in solving problems, but also in the quality of our life. When you change your vocabulary, you change your focus. Instead of focusing on problems, you focus on solutions. And this is really important. By changing the word problem to challenge or opportunity, you can make a big difference in your results. What if you consider each new problem as a gift, as an opportunity to show your skills of analysis, of leadership, of innovation, of creativity, an opportunity to develop new skills, an opportunity to improve a product or service, an opportunity to improve the relationship with your customers, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to strengthen cohesion within your team, an opportunity to share knowledge, an opportunity to review your way of working. I assure you that by adopting this state of mind, you will no longer see problems in the same way, and you will approach them much more calmly. Now that we are clear on the mindset to adopt when approaching problem solving, it is time to get to the heart of the matter and identify the problem, understand it, and reformulate it. This is where I will call on the Sherlock Holmes that lies dormant in you. I appeal to your investigation skills. So, most of the time, a challenge is brought to you by a client, maybe by a colleague, by an employee, or a third party. As we have seen previously, we are often on the defensive when we are told about a problem. Most people will, at all costs, try to show that there is no problem or minimize it or show that this is not their responsibility by passing the ball to another person. Suffice to say that these reactions annoy the person who raises the problem because they do not feel taken seriously or understood. They are not getting the attention they should have. Instead of reacting in this way, why not accept full responsibility for this new challenge and do your best to understand and encourage the expression of your interlocutor? To do this, I would like to introduce the concept of active listening. It is a type of listening that allows you to better understand the challenge encountered by your interlocutor, to understand the issues, the impact, and the consequences. How to listen actively? You must first ask questions. Show interest in your interlocutor and question him or question her to understand the challenge he is encountering in depth. So this also helps him to explain the difficulties he encounters. Listen also in silence. The hardest part in active listening is to be quiet and to let the other person speak. It is also necessary to be present. Be present in the discussion. Do not prepare your answer in your head. Just be in the present moment. Also, reformulate. Do not hesitate to reformulate the words of your interlocutor to be sure that you have understood what he wants to tell you. Also, show empathy. A simple way to show empathy is simply to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see the world from their point of view, and this way you will have a better understanding of how they feel. And finally, active listening also means being attentive to non-verbal communication. The verbal language represents only 7% of communication. Non-verbal language, which means tone of voice and body language, therefore represents 93% of communication. So, do not just focus on the words, but pay attention to the postures, gestures, and intonations of your interlocutors during your conversation. Gestures can communicate much more than the word used. The goal is to collect as much information as possible during the discussion in order to better understand the challenge you are being told. This step is crucial because it allows you to be clear about the facts and avoid making assumptions or misinterpretations. This is really the danger of language. Sometimes we can interpret or presuppose something and which is not true. That's why I recommend that in case of doubts that you ask questions. Do not try to fill in the gaps with presuppositions. You are not in the other person's mind. So if you have doubts or if what the other person is telling you isn't clear, ask questions to be sure that you are talking about the same thing. Good understanding of the problem will prevent you from wasting time later and going in the wrong direction. Sometimes a simple discussion solves a problem. We realize that there was no basic problem, only a misunderstanding. I don't know if you have heard about this example of these two girls who fought to have the only lemon present in the kitchen. So both girls needed a lemon except that there was only one in the kitchen. So this situation can be considered as problematic. This is an example that I heard once in a negotiation training. So the trainer asked us to what would be our reaction in this kind of situation. So I ask you the question now. How would you go about solving this problem? What solution will you suggest to these two girls? So you can hit pause and think about this problem. So the problem is that we have only one lemon and we have two girls who needs this lemon to do something with it. So what solution would you suggest to these two girls? So if you want, you can hit pause and think about the problem. So This is what we did. So we thought about the problem, and after long minutes of discussion, we decided that the best thing to do is to cut the lemon in half. I don't know if you have thought about the same solution, but this is what we thought would be the best solution to keep everyone happy. But in reality, if you have taken my training on negotiation, you will know that this is the worst thing that you can do. Wanting a lemon was the need expressed by both girls. But in reality, the two girls wanted to have the lemon for two completely different reasons. The first one just wanted it for the zest, because she was making a cake and she needed the lemon rind. The other girl needed the lemon juice. So the two needs could coexist, and a single lemon was enough to satisfy both needs. So you see, by digging, by asking questions, by trying to understand each other's needs, we can sometimes easily solve the so-called problems that come our way. Before tackling the actual resolution of a problem, you have to understand it. You have to identify the situation. And for this, I suggest that we see together the 5 W's and 1H method. It is an empirical method of questioning, so the name is complicated to pronounce, but it is very simple. It allows you to obtain an exhaustive list of information on a given situation. It is a technique that it is used particularly in project management, and it is used sometimes by journalists. The 5 W's and 1H method consists of asking open questions, that is to say, to which your interlocutor does not just answer by a yes or no. By asking open questions, open-handed questions, you encourage your interlocutor to formulate complete answers based on their feelings and their own knowledge. So you collect important information in their eyes. 5 W's and 1H method. So who, what, where, when, why, and how. The goal is to collect all information necessary to clarify a situation, a problem, challenge, and also to delimit its scope. So let's start with what. So the goal of the what question is to identify the nature of the problem. What is it about? Which product? Which constituent? What service? What activities or processes are affected by the problem? Then who? To identify which stakeholders are impacted. Who noticed the problem? Who is affected? Where? To identify the place of occurrence. Where does it take place? At what stage of a process? When? To identify the temporal characteristic of the problem, so timing, duration, frequency. How long has the problem existed? When does the problem occur? After what event? How frequently? How soon? Then how? To identify the mode of occurrence of the problem, so the environment. How does the problem manifest itself? In what context? Then the why question, to identify the reason underlying the causes. This technique makes it possible to formulate a problem as a whole by questioning all these aspects. Let's see an example to illustrate this method. If we take the case of an online clothing company which sends its packages via the post office, imagine that it receives more and more complaints about customers who do not receive their parcels within the announced deadline. Let's apply the 5 W's and 1H method to understand the situation as a whole. So, what? What is it about? So, it is a delay in parcels deliveries. Who? So, who noticed the problem? Mainly customers, but also order pickers. Where? At what stage? Which areas are concerned? So, the problem occurs once the order has been paid by the customer. They mainly concern packages of the household linen type. When? How long has the problem existed? We have been seeing the problem for 3 months. The parcels concerned arrive on average 5 days late compared to the time initially announced. How? In what context? So the preparation of the order was delayed because one or more items of the order was not available in stock. Why? Why did this happen? There is a problem with the inventory management system for the household linen category. As the inventory is not up to date at the time of the order, some items are displayed as available when they are not. So this leads to a delay when preparing the order, and therefore throughout the chain until delivery. A question that we can study or brainstorm as a team is the following. How might we better manage household linen stocks and have up-to-date inventory to avoid delivery delays? You can see that this method allows you to pinpoint certain causes. However, it's not sufficient to detect the root causes of a problem. This is what we will see in the rest of the training when we will talk about the identification of causes. Before rushing headlong into problem solving, it is important to rank and prioritize the different challenges you are facing in order to know which ones to work on first. At work, it is not uncommon for requests to abound and for you to be quickly overwhelmed with the requests and problems. You must be aware of your time and how to use it. You certainly cannot be on all fronts at the same time and take care of all the problems that arrive on your desk or in your mailbox. If you try to do this, you risk burning out after a few months. I have already seen new managers wanting to do very well and they ended up in burnout. It is not the goal. There is necessary a hierarchy in the problems. Some issues are more important to solve than others. So you must prioritize the problems in order to focus your energy on the essentials, on what will have the most positive impact on your product, on your customers, on your service, and what will bring you directly closer to your objectives. For this, we can use Pareto's law, also called the 20-80 rule. This law tells us that 80% of the effects are the product of 20% of the causes. So acting on the 20% of the causes solves 80% of the effects. The goal is therefore to identify the 20% of the causes and to only focus on their resolution. In this way, you define a scope of action and you focus on what brings you closer to your goal. The majority of results or impact are due to a minority of causes. For example, 80% of bugs are responsible for 80% of software crashes. 20% of inventory items account for 80% of storage costs, and so on. I will give you an example to apply Pareto's law. Let's say that you manage a software company and you find that your sales are down sharply and you receive more and more negative comments about your product. You will first have to build the Pareto's diagram from the information you receive from your customers or conduct a satisfaction survey to collect data. For example, you can define evaluation criteria and ask a panel of customers to tick those that do not give them satisfaction. For example, we define 10 satisfaction criteria and a panel of 400 customers. So the first criteria is the UI, so the user interface, then usability, speed, customer service, features of your product, price, support, compatibility, updates, and maintenance. We then collect the occurrences of dissatisfaction of each criterion. So we classify this data in descending order in a table, from largest to smallest. Then we calculate the percentage associated with each dissatisfaction criterion and then the cumulative percentage. And here's what we obtain. So the user interface, the UI issues, receive 200 votes from 400 customers surveyed, which means that 200 customers have a problem with the user interface. So that's 50% of the problems. Usability, 120 negative votes, which represent 30% of the satisfaction. So in cumulative percentage, that brings us to 50 plus 30%, which is 80%. So just the first two criteria, user interface and usability alone, represent 80% of bugs or sources of dissatisfaction. And we continue with the other criteria and calculate their percentage of occurrence and their cumulative percentage. From this table, we will then build what is called the Pareto diagram, showing the occurrences of dissatisfaction and the cumulative percentage. The Pareto chart is made up of two axes. The abscissa axis represents the causes, and the y-axis represents the effect on the problem. And here we observe that by working on the user interface and the usability of the software, we eliminate 80% of customer dissatisfaction. These two causes deserve an in-depth analysis to define corrective actions. Here, of course, it is an ideal case and a theoretical case to illustrate Pareto's law. Sometimes we will not always have a ratio of 20-80, even if in many cases the distribution is very close to it. But the idea remains the same. It will be necessary to focus on the causes that produce the most effects. Tim Ferriss talks about this effect in his book The 4-Hour Workweek. Based on Pareto's law, he noticed that 20% of his customers accounted for 80% of his revenue. He also noticed that 80% of the complaints he received come from 20% of his customers. With this data, he decided two things to be as productive and stress-free as possible. So he decided first to focus on the 20% of customers who generated 80% of his revenue. And he made a drastic decision to get rid of the 20% of customers who were causing him 80% of the problems, queries, complaints, and so on. It is a radical decision, but this is what allowed him to keep a stable income, satisfied customers while working fewer hours. This technique offers an interesting point of reference to study a subject and to delimit a perimeter of research, because you now know where to focus your energy. Thus, you have to take the next step, which is to identify the root causes. In the next section, we will cover an important point in problem solving, which consists in discovering and working on the real causes of the problems and not only focusing on the symptoms. When it comes to problem solving, a common mistake is to address the symptoms of the problem instead of its root causes. Like, for example, a person who is in pain, they take a medication to alleviate their pain without necessarily treating the problem at the source. The issue with this approach is that we solve the problem in the short term, but not in the long term. This is because the source of the problem is left untreated, or the symptoms will continue to show up in the future. If we take the example of the person who is hurting somewhere, imagine that a person complains about a headache. It can be the problem. So the problem is that the person is in pain. This person cannot work efficiently, cannot focus. If the person just takes a pill to suppress the symptoms, the headache therefore, it does not solve the problem at the source. The person has no idea what caused the headache in the first place. So this person does not know how to prevent it from happening again in the future. Most people often treat just the symptoms. We have an expression in France, we say that we hide the dust under the carpet to make it disappear. And it is not sustainable in the long term. I give you another personal example. Once I received an email from a person telling me that she had not received an ebook from me. Yet she had filled in her email correctly and had followed the procedure on the website. So the problem is the customer did not receive the ebook as promised on my website. The symptom, sending the ebook did not trigger automatically. The easy way to solve this problem is just to address the symptom and send the ebook manually. This solution only works for this case. It is not global, and above all, it is not long term. So you have to dig to find the cause of the problem. This is what we will see together in this section. We will discover a set of techniques to identify the root cause of the problem. The first technique I would like to share with you is the 5 whys technique. The 5 whys technique was created by Toyota founder Sakichi Toyoda and has been used by Toyota as it evolves its manufacturing methods. It was Taishi Ono, father of the Toyota production system, who described this method of iterative questioning in order to identify the root cause of an observed phenomenon. The idea again is really easy to understand. Whenever you face a problem, ask yourself why 5 times in a row to discover the cause, but also to identify potential solutions. Taishi Ono strongly encouraged his teams to explore all problems encountered by asking themselves 5 times why in order to be sure to discover the root cause and solve the problem at the source. If we take the 2 previous examples to illustrate the technique, here is what we will get. So problem, I'm sick, I cannot work effectively. Symptom, I have a headache. So why do I have a headache? I slept very badly last night. Why did I sleep badly last night? I woke up several times because I was thirsty. Why was I dehydrated? I had not drunk enough during the day. Why didn't I drink enough during the day? I didn't have time to take a break. Why didn't I have time to take a break? I had several meetings that followed one after the other. So the root cause is too many back-to-back meetings during the day. Possible solutions? Ask to hold meetings of 50 minutes instead of 1 hour, to have a 10-minute break between each meeting. Or even refuse consecutive meetings and suggest a new slot. If we take the second example, so the problem is the customer has not received an email with the ebook promised on the site. The symptom? The sending of email did not trigger automatically. So why was the email not sent automatically? The part of code that generates client's notification has not been called. Why was the code that generates the notification not called? The client's notification activation parameter is disabled. Why is this setting disabled? A system update took place this morning and the parameters have not been reactivated. Why? The reactivation request has not been done. Why? This step does not appear in the procedure. So here's an example that comes from the computer world, but we can see that the root cause comes from the procedure which is not complete. Possible solution? Improve the procedure to show all the steps necessary to update the system. You see that with this technique, we get to the bottom of the problem. We clearly identify the cause and we will therefore have a much better chance of finding a lasting solution afterwards. Another technique is to construct a cause and effect diagram. For this, we can use the Ishikawa diagram. It is a technique that was invented in the 60s by Kaoru Ishikawa, a Japanese engineer. Initially, this technique was used in quality management, but we will see that its use can be extended to any problem when looking for the causes. It can also be used to identify risks when starting a project. The Ishikawa diagram, also called the fishbone diagram, gives a visual representation of the causes and effects of a problem. This diagram is also called the 5M diagram because its creator invites us to study the problem from 5 different angles with a 5M mnemonic. So measurement, the environment, the market, the context, the competition, machine, equipment, tools, technology, computer software, and so on. Method, the process in place, the methodology, the operation methods. Material, the materials used, the components, and they classify them by family. You must adapt this method by changing the axis of reflection according to your particular context and the problem that you are studying. You can even add others. Once the problem or challenge has been clearly identified with the 5 Ws and 1H method, for example, you can organize a brainstorming session. We will detail together how to properly lead a brainstorming session a little later in the training. You can then suggest to your colleagues to work on an Ishikawa diagram in order to identify the causes. To do this, here are the steps to follow. So initially, state the problem. Then determine together the axis of reflection if the 5 M's are not suitable for your case. And finally, list the possible causes and apply the 5 Whys method to find the root cause. Let's say together an example of a fishbone diagram with a concrete case from everyday life. For that, let's take the example that, let's take this problem. I messed up the chocolate cake that I was preparing for my son's birthday. So first, the observed effect or the problem is my cake failed. In this case, we will use the 5M to build our fishbone diagram. So we start with measurement or the environment. I was distracted by my son, who was playing nearby and who I had to watch while preparing the cake. I received also a phone call from my mother. Then if we are interested in the machine, the oven I used is old. I didn't have an electric whisk to mix the dough. I used a pie pan instead of using a springform pan. Now let's move to the methods. I did not follow the recipe to the letter. Now let's look at the materials. The sachet of yeast was expired. And finally, the manpower. I didn't know how to line a mold. Well, if you look at the Ishikawa diagram, you have to believe that I'm really not good at baking. But it gives you an idea. Now I suggest that you see another example from the business world. To do this, let's take a problem that many IT companies encounter. Too many bugs in the application. In this case, we will keep only 4 M's: measurement, machine, methods, and manpower. And we will add external factors axis to or the environment. Insufficient computers, unstable test environment, archaic examples, non-existent methods, and conflicting, clearer on the construction of the fishbone diagram. I put an exercise in the next video to train you to build the diagram yourself.